We will now have a panel discussion on the role and prospects of financial intermediaries. The material can be found in your agenda, or if you read the QR code on the screen, you'll be able to have the handouts. Panelist and moderator will be Ms. Noriko Shimizu, Assistant Governor, Bank of Japan. The floor is yours, Ms. Shimizu.
Thank you very much. I am Shimizu of Bank of Japan. I'm happy to serve as both a panelist and a moderator for this session. Chairman Nakaso and FinCity Global Forum staff and management, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. The theme is roles and prospects of financial intermediaries. And we will focus on financial intermediaries and think about transition finance and the future evolution and where we are today. We have panelists who are well versed with transition finance. We have 3 panelists in addition to myself to engage in this discussion. Let me first of all introduce to you the panelists. To my next, on your left, is Managing Executive Director, Development Bank of Japan, Mr. MASAO. He has seen the automotive, electric, and heavy industries. He is covering the second department that covers those industries and the Sustainable Finance Department. Next to him is Chairman of the Japan Association for Financial APIs, Mr. TAKI TOSHIO. His expert field is new payment services using fintech. And to the far right, Representative Director and Group Country Head for Japan, Societe Generale Securities Japan Limited, Branch Manager and Representative in Japan, Societe Generale Tokyo Branch, BRUNO from 2012. BRUNO has been the representative of Japan. Thank you for being here. The theme is the relationship between financial intermediaries and transition finance. And I would like to kick off by speaking about the macro perspective and the role of financial intermediaries in transition finance in way of introduction. And after that, I will ask each panelist to deliver keynote remarks. And then after that, I have prepared 3 questions that I wish to ask to the panelists. So that will be the overall flow for this session. First of all, on climate change. What are some of the initiatives that we are taking? This year, Japan is serving as the G7 presidency, and India is the chair of G20. So both presidencies, Japan and India, both are focusing on climate change as an international priority. And since last year, in terms of transition finance, emerging markets have begun to take ownership in this area and have begun to consider this as their own problem. Japan included in Asia, in comparison to other regions, the presence of manufacturing sector is higher than other regions, and as a result, Asia accounts for half of GHG emissions of the world. So if we are to achieve net zero, a huge amount of investment will be required in this region. So more than we had done historically, we have to focus on transition finance, which will be serving a very important role. And for such funds to be efficiently used, of course, entities themselves have to make efforts, but in order to funnel funds, financial intermediaries and investors will have a major role. They have to be selective to choose the right projects and entities and make the right judgment of risk and return and efficiently allocate capital. In transition finance, say today the company is green or brown, but that's not the only important point. For the transition entities to obtain funds and achieve transition, they would need funds. So that's important. So rather than whether they are green or brown right now, the intermediaries will have to have the foresight to judge whether they will become green. And in comparison to the United States, in Japan, indirect finance is the center of the finance provided to the business community. So in that sense, financial intermediaries play an even more important role in Japan, and SMEs, which is one theme for this session. How we can involve and engage SMEs. There is a role to be played by financial intermediaries in that sense. And also the financial system. We have contacts with financial institutions day in, day out. And from the stability of financial system, since there is material damage caused by climate change, we have to be aware of those risks and promote a transition because it does impact the management of financial institutions themselves. So this material risk and transition risk have implications to corporate management and household income, and therefore response has to be appropriate. And if there's delay in transition to decarbonization, you've all experienced material physical risk. So that would be losses or cost on the part of the loan recipients. And if a transition is deferred, then the asset value of the recipient company will deteriorate, which is a risk. And later on, I will ask the panelists to comment on these points. But appropriate risk management by the financial institutions themselves will become the key. So what about central banks? What are we doing at BOJ? Recently, yesterday, FRB announced its decision-making with high inflation around the world. Many central banks are tightening their monetary policy, and under such a climate, many governors of major central banks are saying that it's difficult to strike a balance. But when we listen to their views, climate change is an important area, and they continue to play important roles in climate change, so they say. So what should central banks do in terms of climate change? Long-term price stability and financial system stability are the missions of central banks. So supporting the private sector response to climate change is a mission in order to contribute to the long-run soundness of the macroeconomy. So in that sense, that's one of our challenges at BOJ. One uniqueness of BOJ is that as an instrument, we can provide back finance to private sector financial institutions providing the finance for climate. I've been talking about enabling the financial intermediaries to make the right choices. And without deforming the market capital allocation based upon the judgment of the financial institutions, BOJ provides back finance. And the financial institutions that will receive such bank finance will be obliged to do information disclosure based upon TCFD. So financial institutions have to have the capability to make the right choice, and at the same time, they would be eligible to back financing by BOJ based upon those criteria. And through the financial institutions, because Japan is an indirect finance country, such operations is effective. And also with the JFSA, scenario analysis is being done for the financial system. And based upon such scenario system, we jointly do with the Financial Services Agency. We will identify the challenges in order to improve risk management and disclosure. And we will continue to engage in dialogue with the financial institutions from such perspective and go ahead with scenario analysis. That concludes my initial remarks. So now I would like to receive the comments from each panelist. First, Masuda-san. In addition to sustainable finance, you also are in charge of large corporate loan recipients. So can you speak from such perspective? Masuda-san, please. Thank you very much. and thank you for this opportunity. Let me first of all introduce to you our bank DBJ. We are not a banking act based upon a base financial institution. There's an act called DBJ Act, and we deal with not only senior loans but subordinated loans, preferred shares, common shares. We offer risk money, and that is the priority of DBJ. And government has 100%, and based upon the act, in the future, we shall be privatized, and therefore, DBJ's activities are 100% commercial based. So the interest rate terms and conditions are well aligned with the market. That's who we are. We're to talk about transition finance today. So sustainable finance is the big umbrella. In 2004, environmental rated loan was began by DBJ. For 20 years, we've been focusing not only on environmental assessment, but health rating as well in providing loans. So such kind of rating-based loans has been provided, and in the past couple of years, we've been injecting our efforts in transition finance. This fiscal year, labeled transition loan, labeled as transition loans. This fiscal year, 4 or 5 such projects exist, and for sectors that do not yet have a roadmap, sustainability-linked loans are being offered. So every year we provide about 10 sustainable-related loans. So we probably are one of the banks that are quite active in this area. So looking at these 10 loans, what are the common trends? The transition loan recipient companies, what are their focuses? Why are they applying for transition loans? Of course, naturally, one of the big reasons is appealing to the stakeholders, their stakeholders. I prepared some slides, but if you could project page 3, Mitsui OSK lines through syndication was provided transition loan. This is for an LNG ferry. LNG fueled vessels shipbuilding was done in a shipyard in Japan. So purpose-defined transition loan was provided to this company. And for the recipient entity, it was important that they were able to communicate that they were eligible for this loan. And there are a few unpurposed transition loans, and the recipients do that because they are labeled as hard-to-abate sectors. They want to remove that label. And regarding transition loans, there's alignment with the government's roadmap. So they want to tell to the society that the entity is taking steps aligned with the government policy. They want to communicate that to the stakeholders. That's the motive. And some of the companies in the future, regarding transition loan or sustainability-related loans, they think that there may be a future where they only will be able to receive such loans in indirect finance. So the earlier the better, they think. There aren't so many companies as such, but many are doing that, thinking that these will be the only loans made available to them in the future. So in this context, what are the values that we provide? In the case of purpose-defined loans, the purpose is defined, so finance is just provided based upon the contract. But in the case where loans have not defined purposes, KPI, SPT, how do we set the target? And I think that's where our competitiveness as a financial institutions has a say. In the case of transition loan, in comparison to sustainability-linked loans, CO2 reduction is the sole purpose. So, but even then, is it 100% elimination or mitigation or reduction? That's where we can exercise our competitiveness in order to design the loans that would be apt to the recipient company. And to give you a more recent example, if we could proceed to the next page, or the next page. To Chugoku Electric Power Company, we provided a syndicated transition link hybrid loan. Capital expenditure burden becomes heavier, so their balance sheet is damaged. In order to maintain their ratings, there are many companies that rely on hybrid finance. In the case of Chugoku Electric Power Company, transition loan and hybrid finance was combined to receive a syndicated transition-linked hybrid loan. And we did this with other banks in the syndication. So in the midst of financing requirements of entities, how do we embed transition finance? That kind of know-how is important as a financial institution. That's it from me at the outset. Thank you very much for sharing with us knowledge on extensive experience. Taki-san, you bridge financial institutions and SMEs using financial data. So you have launched such new services. Any comments?
よろしくお願いいたします。
Hello, thank you. I represent Japan Association of Financial APIs, FAPI. I'm one of the founders of Money Forward. So, Financial APA in 2018 under the Banking Act, this was created as a new business. So we are a group of app developers between financial institutions and users. So credit score companies, credit card companies, factoring companies. So banks' debits and credits faster than the bank. Our software will capture that data and provide added value information to the financial institutions. So we act as an interface. Why am I invited as a speaker? I had to think about that. So Financial API, our first model, the first product actually was an accounting product, automated accounting software on the cloud. That was what we came up with first. What's the beauty of that? You close the year. You prepare the book, you develop financial statements and have appropriate disclosures, so there's that flow. But the data that you need first has to do with the detailed statements from the bank or credit card statement, commercial flow data. There are such data already available. If you can connect those data on the cloud, accounting data actually can be put together on the cloud quite quickly. It may be rough information, but it's still valuable for management purposes. And of course, in terms of financial accounting, you have to pass the audit and so forth. But on a real-time basis, you're able to access such rough accounting data. Complex processing is possible for data. And I think this can be applied to green purposes. And because of that, perhaps I was invited to speak about this. And so let me show you some slides. Sorry for showing the triangle right away. So new accounting software developer, that's who we are. So from the small business perspective, we develop customers. We develop smaller business owners. In large companies, TCFD is already adopted. Our company is listed on the prime section, so investors urge us to make disclosures. Why are we not disclosing scope 1, scope 2, and so forth? So listed companies do make disclosure because of this pressure from the investor community, but smaller businesses, they may be making efforts. But although there is green promotion by the government, it has not reached small businesses yet. So small, middle businesses, for them, I think we can provide automation for scope 1, scope 2 disclosures for them. And there are two possibilities. So without having the person responsible, at least if it's rough, I think we will be able to prepare data that can be useful for this, empirically speaking. So looking at household finances, 70%, 80% of emissions, so electricity, gas for vehicle, we will be able to estimate 70 to 80% of the household emission. And this is similar to smaller businesses. The accuracy of estimation may be 70, 80%, but we can provide that level of data. Here in Japan, this is yet to be turned into business, and overseas, there's already a market for this, and I would like to talk about that later. But through visualization tools as such, within financial institutions, perhaps products can be developed, and that may happen at some point in the future. So this green part, there's lots of pressure because there are listed large companies for disclosure. In Europe, consumers are active, so consumers have preference for green products, ethical products. There are incentives, and creating such incentives is important. But the raw data, the starting point, if it's fresh, and of course, for a new startup, it's very difficult to continue handling data. But if it's provided on a real-time data, that could be useful. So such a business model, generating such data. So that is what is starting within our API association. Thank you by way of introduction.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Since data is available, how can you use that at minimum cost for transition finance? Especially that could be an area of high interest in the emerging countries. Last but not least, Mr. Gosog. You represent the European financial institutions, so from a big picture level, could you talk about your shift and how you support the shift of the clients?
Thank you. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you very much. I am from Societe Generale. Let me speak in English.
Introduce Societe Generale. If I can have the slide, please. The next one. Yes, so we are an international bank with almost 160 years of history. As you see, we have a presence in 60 countries, an active presence. And here in Japan, we have been operating since 1973. So actually, this year is our 50-year anniversary in Japan. And our main activity are around capital markets, asset management, aircraft leasing, and project finance. So if we can move to the next slide, please. Regarding energy transition, Societe Generale is one of the leading banks in sustainable finance and strongly committed to financing energy transition here in Japan. We are continuously reinventing our business to align with the changing needs of our clients, helping them to generate a positive impact in their activities in order to support a better and sustainable future. As you can see, we have been awarded quite strong and reputational awards in terms of Bank of Sustainability and Bank of the Year of Sustainability. So that's the global view. Here in Japan, we are the only non-Japanese banks to support the two industry-scale offshore wind farm, one project in Ishikari, another project in Akita and Noshiro. That's about Societe Generale. If we can move to the last slide, please. It's back to why we are here and about transition finance. Perhaps first we need to remind the global purpose. To achieve the decarbonization goal, we must not only transform the structure of the energy supply, but actually we must transform the global economy. So the financial institution, and that's my key point, have a central role to play in supporting our clients in this transformation by offering innovative solutions such as transition finance. And I'm going here to make a key point about what this transformation means. It means that we must do it without leaving anyone behind. That's a key point, and that's why the keyword I'm going to use in terms of illustrating this transformation is shift. Because in shift, you have both the idea of we need to change and both the idea of time to change. So transition is key. Of course, we need to go for decarbonization, but transition is key, hence shift. And the first entities who need to shift are financial institutions. We need to shift first. We need to align our portfolio, our activities to decarbonization goal. We need to align notably to the Net Zero Banking Alliance objectives. And for that, we need to shift almost everything. We need to shift our business model, because historically, for example, if I take Societe Generale, we used to be, and we are still, quite a strong bank on oil and gas financing. So as you can see, some challenges on our side as well. We need to shift our expertise. We need to shift the way we are structuring products and shift the way we are structuring project finance in order to propose solutions that are adapted to this new world. So in Societe Generale, we actually started the shift journey more than 2 decades ago. We have been supporting renewable energy for more than 20 years, and we have been developing positive impact solutions in the area of advisory, financing, and investment. And actually, today, the group is ahead of its target to provide more than 300 billion euros, so the equivalent of 40 trillion yen, in terms of financing the energy transition between now and 2025. So this structural transformation, which is a shift, which has to come from financial institutions, will have a strong positive impact as well on our clients. It will actually directly benefit our corporate clients because we know what it means to shift. We know the challenges and the opportunities, so we can help the clients to proceed on the same way.
Thank you, Bruno.
We heard from the three, and each of you introduced to us very pioneering initiatives, inclusive, integrated services being provided for your client's transition and your own transition. I would like to now ask 3 questions and ask the panelists to respond to each. First question. In promoting transition finance, how does corporate behavior change? First of all, Masuda-san, you have many contacts with the corporate sector. Why don't you go first? Thank you very much. Through transition finance, corporate behavior is changing or not? Or would it be possible to change corporate behavior? I think this is a very essential question. So the short answer is, including financial institutions, it depends on who. And the answer could be either yes or no. So what does that mean? I touched upon this slightly already, but when we engage in transition finance, in the case where the use of proceeds for the loans is specified, we will design the loans for that purpose. But in the case of transition loans with unspecified purpose, and there are many of that, and especially in the case of bonds, many of the fixed income products are purpose defined. But when the client does not want to define the purpose, loans are more appropriate. So in many cases, we provide loans with purpose unspecified. KPI, sustainable performance target. How do we set those targets and metrics? And in that process, how can the recipient companies and financial institutions sincerely engage with each other and reach an agreement? CO2 intensity, CO2 emission. Say we just use that metric and reach an agreement and label it as transition finance. That's the easy way. Or do we go through the pathway of dialogue with the recipient? I am a salesperson as well for those sectors that the moderator mentioned. So as a person engaged in business development, I want those deals to be agreed upon quickly. But I think it's the same with DBJ and other financial institutions. We have to really face the client and the uniqueness of each client and define KPI and SPT that would truly lead to changing the corporate behavior of the recipient company. And one slide I skipped was our finance to Kawasaki heavy industry and sustainability-linked loan. Very briefly, on KPI, hydrogen value chain establishment. This is completely different from CO2, but this is the KPI. And for SPT, by what year they will come up with hydrogen vessel, and by what year they would reach certain tonnage of transport capability of using the hydrogen vessels. So that kind of process was done through dialogue, and that process in itself is the key in causing corporate behavior. So, and also in terms of transition finance, that's not the goal. Providing transition finance is not an end in itself. In the process of providing transition finance, as we engage in dialogue with the clients, what kind of investment are they going to do next? And what's important for them to do which kind of investment earlier than later? That kind of dialogue is necessary. So if that's the nature of the project, we can solicit these kind of investors and we can provide this kind of debt and then front load this plan so that you can achieve the goals earlier than scheduled. So by doing that, we may be able to entice investment that could lure the companies to change their behavior. That's the goal. And for that goal, we use the means of transition finance. So that's our approach. And by taking those means, we may be able to realize change in corporate behavior. Thank you, Masuda-san. Communication is necessary. Taki-san, please go ahead.
Well, I would like to talk about SMEs, unlike Matsuda-san. Well, SME behavior change is something that we take seriously as a business. Digitization and doing DX, it doesn't resonate with SMEs. Of course, as a challenge for society, DX is important. They know that. But unfortunately, compared to large companies, SMEs' productivity is lower. So the benefit of digitization is greater for them. But actually, SMEs do not change all that much, usually. So before GX, I'm showing this as an example. DX is shown as an example. May we have the slides up? Well, I'm sorry, it's a bit casual. On the left-hand side, during the Showa era, and toward the end of Heisei era, I think we were overcoming the barrier of electronization, and now we're embracing cloud. Those who are embracing cloud, 70%. Those who are not, 30%. So when we talk about Japan and the Japanese people like to talk about barriers. Let's overcome barriers, eliminate Hanko or SAMs. Let's electronize, digitize. We often say that by when and so forth. But people talk about it, but not execute it. Well, for back office operation, even if you don't digitize, you're not going to be in trouble right away. And accounting system, invoicing is a huge theme this year. But you tend to do something because you're told by the government. And so that's been the practice here in Japan. But with this pace, with this speed, I don't think we'll be able to achieve our vision by 2050. So what can be done? So the two motorcyclists, what's happening is represented here. So what is the conclusion? What is the reward? They have to understand. Well, if it's a soba noodle delivery, if Uber Eats can operate, then you will be able to increase the number of customers as well as the ticket size. And if it's not soba, a pizza can be delivered. Create a win-win relationship like Uber Eats. And even if you're not able to overcome barriers, you may be able to benefit. And so post-DX, you are able to gain more customers. They need to understand. So 10, 20 years from now, we have to achieve something that is only natural. And then that will lead to greater revenue, reduce the loss, guide them to that. And then they will be encouraged to embrace DX and GX. And for that, information is necessary.
Thank you very much. Incentivize. Bruno, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So as I explained earlier, financial institutions have been transforming their business model, and this experience, which clearly benefit our clients, customers, especially, notably, in terms of changing the behavior. There are many ways to change behavior. I'm going to illustrate it with 3 examples. I think that the first way to change the behavior is to bring innovation. We need to bring solutions for the energy transition, notably innovation like sustainable finance and transition finance, of course, in order to develop new business model. I'm going to take a very simple example, which is actually a complex discussion. It's hydrogen. Japan happens to be the first country in the world to design a national strategy on hydrogen back to 2017. And today, hydrogen is still at the heart of the Japan strategy in terms of decarbonization up to 2050 and beyond. But we know as well that the business case on hydrogen are not easy, that a lot of things need to be built on, including ecosystem, supply chain, everything. And that's where financial institutions can provide innovative solutions in order to develop this kind of project. For example, in Societe Generale, we have been promoting the financing solution for blue and green hydrogen so that we can offer a solution which allows to build sustainable commercial scale projects. So the first thing is innovation. The second way to change the behavior is that it's advisory. It sounds a little bit strange because the banking system has been advising our clients for decades, if not for centuries. But I think that advisory is more important now than ever. And because we have a lot in Japan of international banks, including Japanese banks, of course, we have experience on other regions, on other countries, on other sectors, which we can share here in Japan, bring in Japan, and adapt all this experience in order to create a local context, local project for local context. So the more we show what is happening worldwide, the more we will change the behavior. So that's the second thing, advisory. And the third element it's not the smallest one I will mention, is to invest in human capital. We need to create new talents. We need new experts on all these topics. And here again, we have this idea of shift. For example, in Societe Generale, as I have explained, we need to shift as well. We have transformed our experts that used to work on oil and gas projects into energy transition experts, typically on renewable energy. Always the idea of leaving no one behind. And of course, you do that with ambitious training, upskills programs. And we are sure that it can be done as well on the corporate side. So in summary, to change behavior, we must be innovative, we must give the right advice based on experience, and we must create a new talent pool on energy transition.
Thank you, Bruno. So, human capital のその教育というか経営も
Human capital enlightenment and training is important. Yes, I agree to that. Now, next question. This overlaps with the first question, but SMEs or supply chain. The supply chain has to be decarbonized. Taki-san and Mr. Gossok. First, Taki-san.
Can you please have the slide up? So the choices for SMEs, as I said, right now, they don't have a lot of incentive or pressure, but could there be emerging risks? As is on the lower right, on supply chain, well, you have to respond to Scope 1, 2 disclosure. They're under pressure. Listed companies are under pressures. Well, even if it's an SME, they are pressured to accept what is green at a pretty high cost already. So as Bruno-san said, there's a lot of room for advisory for SMEs. Well, this is not a theme for just individual companies. It's for the whole industry. So there is a room for advice provided by financial institutions, and these risks are associated with the core business of SMEs. So I think there's an entry point for SMEs. Because I'm a technologist, to say something a little more interesting, Money Forward, we handle household accounting systems. Well, we can create Bell Mark 2.0, showing that you are more ethical, that you embrace green products. You can demonstrate that, and there are benefits, real benefits in daily life. And you are able to create a bias as to what you're going to choose as a consumer. So green small business, we want consumers to choose that. In Europe, that's already part of the social norm. But here in Japan, can we incorporate that as part of technology to be adopted here in Japan? So smaller companies, if they can simply disclose their CO2 emissions, if they can do that, then using that, credit associations, local banks, they may be able to provide green loans based on their disclosures, and that's crucial. So in terms of governance, this is where debt governance can come into play. So financial institutions can provide advice, and our association and a group of member companies can provide systems necessary for that.
Thank you. The Bell Mark example was quite interesting. Bruno?
Thank you very much. So when we talk about SMEs, we still have the idea of leaving no one behind, because during the energy transition, we believe that SME could appear as the most fragile players during the energy transition. And one way to approach this critical question is to consider energy transition across the entire supply chain. We have to tackle the supply chain risk, which is relatively high everywhere, including in Japan. And we have not only one supply chain risk, we have several supply chain risks. I can take two examples. The first supply chain risk is what we call the concentration of resources, or the concentration of production in a few countries of a key element of the energy transition. So it's what we call a security of supply problem. We know that with rare metals, which are concentrated on simply on a few countries. And the second supply chain risk is the impact of energy transition on local supply chain. Here, typically here in Japan, where it is not just the big corporates at the top of the pyramid that need to transform, but all the different layers of suppliers as well, which could be more difficult for them. So, and we have typically the example of the automotive industry in that respect. So, back to the role of financial institution. Typically, we have to adopt a less fragmented and a broader view on energy transition by integrating this dimension of supply chain. I take one example. In Societe Generale, we used to have a business line on metals and mining, looking at extracting the metals. We have completely reorganized in order to do at the same time metals and mining extraction, transportation, usage in terms of battery, and recycling. So that's the way we need to do in order to tackle this both issue, the both problem of supply chain risk, both the security one and leaving no one behind.
Thank you very much. No one behind. 大変だ、大事。
Leave no one behind is a very important message. Thank you. Final question. This is on risk management on financial institutions. Masuda-san. Sorry, I was quite lengthy in my comments, so I'll try to be brief. Climate change risk is difficult. Conventionally, we used to deal with credit risks, and the nature is different. And forecasting based upon historical trend is difficult. So the methodology that financial institutions applied may not work, and it's a difficult risk. So on the basis of trial and error, we are trying to apply metrics for transition risk and physical risk, but we are constantly trying to improve upon our methodology. And to the extent possible, we try to do effectively risk management to secure soundness, which is very important. What's important in the actual investment? Again, now is the time when information productivity of financial institution is questioned, and through dialogue with clients to avoid a situation where disclosure is not possible because the financial institution does not have expertise, and also try to find opportunities for new finance by capturing the demand. Thank you for catching up and your brief answer. We have only a few minutes left, so one final word on transition finance, the future of transition finance. You have each written your panels. First of all, Masuda-san, thank you. Making friends. That's the word I chose. Annually, we do questionnaires, and many corporate respondents need this kind of concept, network of friends. Take transition, for example. Even if one player in the value chain works hard, unless the company before you and after you works hard, we won't be successful. Jheim, a hydrogen station company, we have taken investments. You need cheap hydrogen to be provided. You need hydrogen cars in order for hydrogen stations to be profitable. So we provide transition loans as banks, but equity investors has to exist, and operating companies themselves may not be able to afford their own equity on their own. So depending on the risk, each player has to provide its own finance. So sideways and vertically, we need to make friends in order to elevate our level in general. So friend making. Thank you very much, Masuda-san. Next, Taki-san.
はい、
Yes. Taki's key phrase is like Yusuke Narita's. It says carrot and stick. Well, a stick is easier. For example, carbon taxation. You shut out the company from a supply chain. And this could happen, actually, which is negative. So we should focus on the carrot. It's not subsidies, in my mind, because subsidies are not sustainable. So, well, I think a carrot is about avoiding the stick in the future. You can say so. So anything that's innovative along those lines can serve as a carrot. But broadly, whether you can gain new customers in the future, could the issuers be persuaded to work toward that, not just bellmark or label that I talked about? Well, a supplier and consumers have to make a choice upon getting information from SMEs. And it could be financial institutions, institutional investors. They need to take action quickly so that SMEs can be rewarded for providing such information. And creating a carrot for that is important.
Thank you, Bruno.
Thank you very much.
Going to be surprised, the keyword is shift. We need to help our clients to transform themselves and to seize new business opportunities. And for once, I'm going to give a touch of optimism. Energy transition is not just about problems and challenges. It's also new territories to explore. And we, as financial institutions, will act proactively by leaving no one behind. We are in the transition. We are in the shift.
Thank you very much. Very 英語じゃなく非常に前
Thank you very much for the forward-looking message. Finally, let me show you my slide. Global view, especially Asian view, is necessary. I was in London for 4 years, and right after Lehman Brothers, it was a center that caused the crisis, but they began to make new financial rules, which was quite impactful. So Asia is with many missions, so Tokyo can be at the center to lead the transition. So I have high hopes that we would be able to do that in Tokyo. We talked about SMEs, but not just identifying the dots, but drawing lines and the plate, and everybody becoming friends to shift all together and engage in communication. So achieving transition in depth to entice behavioral change. So very meaningful comments were shared by the panelists. Thank you very much for your attendance. Let's thank them with a round of applause.
ありがとうございました。どうぞ皆様。
Thank you very much. Please step down from the stage. We thank the panelists and the panelist and the moderator, Ms. Shimizu. Thank you very much. Starting 16:45, we'll have a panel discussion on approaches from the capital market side.